Let's talk a little bit about reflections. Now there's two types of reflections we have to concern ourselves with. There are the reflections that you get when you have your 3D object in an environment, as in it's reflecting its environment that's around it. Earlier we had the car on the lawn, and we used an image as a reflection map, so it looked to help marry the car to the background scene. And then we also had, in the countertop, we had our apple and our plate object being reflected in the surface of the counter. So we have kind of scratched the surface on it, but we're going to go into a little more depth. And we're also going to talk about a few other things we need to deal with. So in this case, we have a back porch scene with some windows. What I'd like to do, I'm going to insert a sphere that comes in as if it's in this room, and then have it reflected in these windows here, because they're very reflective, but we don't want the whole thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is load an object to be reflected, which will just be my ball object, and using my 3D imagination, I'm going to move it as if it's moving through the porch here. Maybe moving that way. And if it's really in this environment, we should see a reflection in there. So I'm going to load up, well, let's just load up our basic plate, front square. And I want to rotate it so it's kind of matching those windows. But I also have to pay attention that I want it to match so that this is actually in its field of view. So let's make sure everybody's where it's supposed to be. I can see. Kind of different than the front view, so we're going to move it over here because we want it to be reflecting. Now, we're going to have to move and rotate. And now stretch. Now we only want it to be reflective where the windows would reflect. So we're going to wind up using a front projection map of a map that I created. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now just to get a rough idea to see if we're somewhere in the ballpark, let's set that surface, that front square surface, to 100% reflection. Take down our diffuse. Well, not all the way. And make sure we are ray tracing. We're just going to do ray tracing with spherical map, but I'm not going to select a spherical map. So I only have ray tracing. And make sure I have ray tracing turned on. And let's do a test render. Okay, we are seeing that we are getting a reflection, which is kind of cheating a little bit. I think we can rotate that a little more. Size it up so it covers all of the glass. I can see it's still not quite right. My camera angle isn't quite right. Another quick test here. Yeah, we're close. Alright. Make sure that keep framed on 0. Alright. So we need to do a few more adjustments. I've created a map that matches the shiny part of the glass in my background image. I simply brought this image into my paint program and made white squares where I wanted it to be reflective. So I'm going to set my reflection to 0 here. Actually set my diffuse to 0. Set my reflection using an image map and there's my reflection map. So only the white areas will be reflective. And also, I'm going to use front projection mapping. So it's perfectly lined up with my background image. Let's do a quick render here and see what we have. Oh, what we have is pretty good. It's only reflecting where the glass is, so that's pretty close. However, we have all this black area, and we're still planning to do this in a single pass, so I'm going to make one more change. Now, this doesn't make sense, I'll warn you. I'm going to set this to 100% transparency, and I'm going to do another render. And for some reason, even though it's 100% transparent, I still see the reflection. See what our alpha looks like. Well, it's not in there. However, there it is. Our reflection is showing up even though the object itself is 100% transparent. And now we're out of the range of the reflection. There we are. So, to sum it up, this object, our reflection object, is 100% transparent, but it is still showing a reflection. In fact, that reflection looks a little bit too bright, at least eyeballing it for my taste. I might take that down a little bit. Let's take it down to 50%, our layer opacity. Now we are having a problem with we're seeing through the object. Now that is just something that happens when you're compositing a reflection on top of a reflection, which things go on top of other things. Because I made that partially transparent or not fully 100% reflective, we're seeing what would have been there before. You can either live with it or you can take great pains to paint that out. It's up to you. Having the windows reflect the ball is only half the equation. What if we also want the ball to reflect the environment? Well, we go into our surface editor, select our ball surface, and we'll set it to 75% reflectivity. We render this, what do we have? Well, it doesn't look like much. We see a little bit of reflection here, and I think that's just recursion of the ball reflecting itself in the plane. It's not reflecting the rest of the environment. We could do what we did earlier, go into our environment, ray tracing plus spherical map, select the background image, and render that. And we're getting something what we like. The problem with this, let's give ourselves a nice shiny phantasm kind of ball here. The problem with this is that it won't react properly as it's moving through the scene. We'll get some sense of movement. As you see between these two images, the image map really isn't moving that much. What we need to do is create an environment. In fact, it's called a reflection box. And all a reflection box is just a box with this image, this background image, or something similar to it, mapped on the inside so this reflection can see it. Now there's a couple of settings we'll need to do for that, but let's jump into Modeler for a moment. Creating the reflection box couldn't be much easier. We're simply creating a box. The only thing we're going to do differently is we're going to flip the polygons so the normals are facing inward. Normally they face outward. By hitting the F key, it flips them, and what that means is they're all facing inward. We want that because we're going to place the image on the inside. In fact, why don't we do that right here in Modeler? Stretch that out there. And in my surface editor, unnamed, I'm going to go in and image map with that same image. And let's try cubic map, see what happens. Use texture. There's our image. Now you see that image is mapped squarely on all sides of the box. We don't necessarily want to have it that way. So let's try a different method of mapping. Let's go planar. And now it will map forward and back, which is a little bit better, but still not exactly what we want. So let's go cylindrical on the y-axis, and I think this is closer to what we want. So it's kind of like the whole room wrapped in a circle, almost like it's surrounding a sphere. So we're going to save this object and load it into layout. I now have the reflection box loaded into layout. As you can see, it's a little slow, but we can see our real-time OpenGL. We have kind of a rough approximation of what that room really looks like. It's a little small. Let's take our overview. And it's not exactly in the right place, so we're going to put it there. Actually, we want that at 0. I'm going to size it up. And the problem we have here is that it's overwriting our background image. Now, not a terrible thing right now because we can see it. And we can kind of get a sense it's going to reflect, this is going to reflect there. In fact, let's do a test render. Oh, and we don't have our reflection on the ball anymore. Alright, let's take this down. Reflection 75. Okay. We still have our window in there, which is reflecting the ball. But we have an awful lot of other things going on too. So what we're going to do is select our reflection box, go into our properties. We want to turn off the shadows just for now. Well, because we don't need it. We want to have seen by rays, so we don't want to play with this one, but we want to have unseen by camera. And even though we can still see it here, when we render it, that reflection box is going to be gone. Now we do have a little problem here that the reflection box is also being reflected in these windows here, and that's why you do multi-pass rendering. Let's make this picture a little bit bigger. And move our ball over here so we can see it a little bit better. And let's really crank up the reflection here and make it shiny and render it. And our ball is now reflecting the room. It's reflecting what it's seeing as it moves through the room. It will see this side reflected here, and it will reflect the windows properly. Let's move it over to the window. Oh, too far. Do another test render here. And we'll do another test render. Oh, we put it behind the window. Our transparent window. Let's make sure we have that moved out of the way. And where is our reflection plane? There it is. Okay, so we're going to grab our ball, move it there. Another quick render. So this is what's known as a reflection box. It serves many purposes, and the purposes we're using it for is so when this object moves through this environment, it is coming closer to giving us a true image of what it's like. We see you're much closer to the wall here, farther from the windows, and here we are closer to the ceiling. Now, in a serious job, what you would do is go in, take a photograph of this wall, of the ceiling, actually of all 6 sides, top, bottom, all 4 walls, and map that onto a cube. This is like they do in the movies, like in The Matrix. And it's not real critical if it's a reflection box. In fact, you probably would want to go in and blur those images so you have a softer reflection. But that way, that ball can move through that environment looking like it's very much in that scene, even though it's not. And that's how you use a reflection box. We're going to examine this a little bit more with an outdoor scene that we'll have in the upcoming segment.